Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another live stream here on ON1 Photos. Today, we're going to be looking at ON1 Photo Raw and manipulating some light in images. Now, as you can see, these are the exact same images that I used in the Luminar Neo live stream. So if you want to go to the description box below, you can get a copy of all of these images for free from Unsplash. And you'll be able to follow along with me, with the exception of a few raw images that I shot. And it just wouldn't be the same if I didn't talk about how you can manipulate light using raw photos instead of using all of these JPEGs, which most of the concepts that I'm going to show are the exact same, but it is a little bit different with a raw image. Now, if you have questions, please leave them in the comment section below, either if you're watching this live or on the restream. And if you are interested in more tutorials on Luminar Neo or ON1 Photo Raw and other photo editing software as I start to learn new ones, then hit that subscribe button so you can be a part of the team and the community over here at ON1 Photos. So with that being said, let's go ahead and open an image and get started. So I'm going to start with a raw image, and I actually have this image right here. So we're going to click edit, and this image, it's straight out of camera. I haven't done anything to this image just yet, and that's what we're going to work on. So the first thing that I want to share with you is blend modes. Now, depending on what you are doing, I'm just going to throw a curves adjustment layer on here, hit this drop down, and I'm just going to put a preset. Don't worry so much about what I just did. I was clicking fast, but that's not as important, okay? And I'm going to minimize layers there. What I do want to show you is how you can use the blend modes inside of ON1. After you've made an edit on your image, you can use the blend modes to really bring your photos to life. Now, I actually think this looks pretty cool. This is one of my personal presets, and I use this from time to time, and I think this really just looks cool on this image. However, if you hit the gear icon, right, it's normally gray. When you click on it, it'll turn blue, and then you'll end up with a few options here. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you know exactly where I'm going with this. I'm going to hit the drop down here, and the first option that I think you should try is overlay. Whenever you use curves, overlay is going to give you like a contrasty image, a more contrasty image, right? And this is one of the coolest ways to kind of start manipulating the light in your image. Now, you can use the opacity slider if you're like, hey, you know what, that is way too strong. Well, you can use the opacity slider, and you can just start pulling that back until it blends the way that you want it to. Now, using the backslash key, I can turn off the preview and turn it back on. Now, hopefully that's coming through on the YouTube compression, but if it's not, this is definitely something you should try. You won't have this image in your in the Unsplash because this is a personal image, but take your own raw image, right, and try this out. Now, I do recommend that you put a curves adjustment layer on your raw images because that's how you really start to mold the contrast in your image. Now, the second best, or I won't even say the second best, right? The next option that you have is soft light. Now, soft light is way more subtle, right? This is like you could barely tell the difference between overlay and soft light. Let me go ahead and pull that back up. So I'm on soft light now, and then I went to overlay. Soft light, overlay. So let me zoom in here. I'm gonna zoom in on this leaf, all right? And we're just gonna take a look at how this really impacts it. And I'm gonna bring this up to 100% so you can really see what's happening. All right, we're on soft light, and now we're on overlay. You see how the darkest areas just got darker? That's all that's happening with the light. It's darkening the darker areas, and it's adding this as a more aggressive contrast adjustment. All right, and then if I go soft light, it's going to add it as a more modest soft light adjustment. Now, another option that you can use is lighten. Now, let me zoom out. We'll just select lighten and zoom out. Now, lighten does something a little bit different. Okay, so, click the wrong thing. If I go back to normal, this is what normal looks like. Okay, and then if I go to lighten, look at how the contrast is, it's more airy, right? So if you wanted to go for like the light and airy vibe, this is one of the things that you would do. You would fade the photo, and then I think you would throw a lighten blend mode on here. Blend modes are not overly complicated, and inside of ON1, really, you can just test them out because it gives you that live preview as you go through them. Like even darken looks kind of cool with this effect. All right. You don't have to really know what it does. All you have to do is figure out what adjustment you want, and then you can come in here and you can grab a blend mode, and you're going to get a different look. And you are manipulating the exposure of the underlying picture, which is the unedited version of the picture, with whatever edits you're adding, and that's how this is blending. This is one of the powers of ON1 Photo Raw that I think we miss all too much. All right, so I just want you to know that this is available to you. And then there's luminosity, which we'll get to that in a little while. All right, so there is blend modes. Now, we're just gonna move this back to normal. I'm gonna shut that. And so the next one up is luminosity masks. Now, luminosity masks are super easy to make inside of ON1 Photo Raw. All you have to do is click on the mask icon and then click this button that says lumen. Now, if you want a pro tip, what you can do is you can come up to, I believe it is, edit. There we go. Edit and then keyboard shortcuts. And you could type in lumen, and then you can create a keyboard shortcut for your luminosity mask. All right. So you just click inside of here. It's going to double click, and it's going to say the factory preset default is going to be changed. Would you like to create a new preset? You can say yes, and we'll change this to Big Chris. It's one of my nicknames. Okay, and then we'll come back here, hit lumen. This is a new install on my MacBook Air. That's the reason why I don't have the default, or I'm sorry, a preset in here. But let's say we want Shift L, Shift L2, or Shift L at. Nope. Let's go Control L. All right, Control L it is. That's going to create a luminosity mask. So I'm going to hit reset, bring my mouse over here so you know I'm not clicking it, and our keyboard shortcut is Control L. Look at that. I just created a luminosity mask. So just think about how fast you could be working inside of here. Now, I could just hear you saying like, Chris, what the heck is a luminosity mask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me hit the letter O so we can see what's happening. Now, it looks like I just made a black and white image, but instead, what I did is I'm showing you the mask that is being made by ON1. The brightest areas in the image are being affected, and the darkest areas are being left alone. And there's a really nice gradation because it is masking based off of the luminance value of the particular pixel. I just said a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. Let me simplify this. As bright and as dark as your image is, ON1 is making a mask to cover up the brightest areas, or apply an effect to the brightest areas, and not apply that effect to the darkest areas. And anything that it can't determine if it's completely bright or completely dark, it is going to mask out, or it's going to give it like a 50% shade, or gradually mask that away. So let me show you that in action. If we come down to our levels, or let's start with window. So if I pull the window closer to the right side where all of my brightest tones are, anything that's black on this mask means that the effect is not going to show through. Okay? Anything that's white on this mask means that the effect is going to show through. So as I pull my window over to the right, I am taking it and I am only applying this to the brightest areas. The closer I get this to the brightest area, the more it's applying only to the brightest areas until I get to just the extreme highlights in the image. All right, now let me go the opposite direction. If I pull the white slider all the way down to the left, I'm taking it out of the brightest areas, and because I have this mask addressing just the brightest areas, these are areas that are in shadow, but they are being illuminated just a little bit by the light. Can you see how powerful these luminosity masks are inside of ON1? And I created this with the click of, or with a keyboard shortcut of Shift or Control L, right? I made a keyboard shortcut. So luminosity mask. Now, that's the window, okay? Now what you have is your levels. And the levels is really your fine-tuning adjustment of how that light, or how this mask is impacting the luminance of your image, all right? So you have your darks all the way on the left, and then you have your whites or your highlights all the way on the right. In the middle, this is your transition slider. Think of this as, do you want more darks? Because as I move this closer to the right, look at how much I'm removing, right? I'm removing stuff from my mask because it's now turning black. The closer, or the more I pull this to the right, the darker areas in, or the brighter areas in my image become darker. And the more I pull this to the left, look at how much brightness, because I'm bringing more of this over this way. Think about me taking the brightest areas and just pulling it all the way over, all right? I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. Now, we'll double click that to bring it into the middle. Now, if I wanted to just bring, or I wanted to preserve my shadows, like I don't want any adjustment in my shadows, just like my window, I can pull this closer to the whites. So now I'm not addressing I'm not applying this to the darkest areas of my image. I'm only applying it to this level of luminance and all the way up to the brightest area. Now, if I don't want to apply it to the brightest areas, look, I can just pull this down, and that's where this window comes in. I can pull in my window, right? So now I'm not applying it to the brightest areas. And as I fade, I get to choose how this fades between the darkest point to the brightest point in the level adjustment that I made. The window, think of this as like your larger selection of, do I want this in the brightest area? No, I don't want it in the brightest areas. I only want it in the darkest areas. All right. Now, because I have that going on, I got to pull this over here. And now I am addressing just the darkest areas in the image, right? You can see that I lit that up. So let's go ahead and reset that, and we'll reset window. And we'll make this make a little bit more sense in a practical aspect. Okay, I'm gonna hit O. And now we don't have to worry. You can work in that overlay, looking at your mask overlay. The way that I like to really work with luminosity mask is, one, I like to increase the feather a little bit. If I hit the letter O, you'll see that it looks like I just blurred the image. What it's doing, especially when I'm working with light, I don't want harsh shadows, or I'm sorry, harsh lines and transitions. What I want is more of a graded transition when I'm working with light. So I'm just going to pull this feather up until the image starts to get just a little blurred, right? Or my mask starts to get a little blurred. That means it's going to spread evenly and blend well. Now what I'm going to do is make whatever adjustment that I want to make. Just need to make sure that I'm on normal. Yep. Okay. So I'll go ahead and we'll just add some contrast to this image. So I'll boost my highlights, bring down my shadows to about there. Okay. Now, right now, this is only applying to the brightest areas of my image. Where there's white, it's applying, and then where there's gray, it's applying just a little bit, and where there's black, there's nothing being applied. If I click on my layer mask, I can come back over here to my levels. And let's say I really just don't want to deal with anything that's happening in the blacks. I can pull this window slider over until I get to where it's not really impacting the blacks. But I can see that I probably need to pull it a little bit out of the highlights as well. So then I can pull my window slider back from the highlights. And look at how it's preserving those highlights just a little bit. All right. And you can also check the background as I turn this off and on. You can see the background's just getting brighter and darker. Okay. Now, if I hit O, my mask doesn't look very good, but the overall impact on the image is looking okay. All right. So luminosity masks, you can use them, especially when you couple it with one of these blend modes, right? You can really start to create some interesting things with the light inside of your image. Now, the goal here is not for me to show you the best ways of doing this, right? Because then you would be editing like me. My goal in every video is not to get you to edit like me, but to open your eyes to ways that you can use ON1 Photo Raw to get your creative image out. And not to feel intimidated by all of the extra features that are included in ON1, because the reality is ON1 is a full suite of just all kinds of photo editing things, right? And we're going to stay focused on manipulating light in today's live stream, but I just wanted to make sure that you did know why I'm doing the videos that I'm doing. So now we're going to move into one of my favorite adjustments. So I'm just going to hit cancel on that. And then we are going to open up a different image, and we'll open up this image. Again, this is another raw image that I shot when I went to a state park in South Carolina. And as you can see, it's just some stairs. Now, if I hold down the J key, you can see I got all kinds of stuff going on. In my highlights up at the top, I got some blown out highlights. Let's see if those can be recovered. So let's go ahead and turn on that indicator. We're just going to pull down the exposure. I want to see, oh yeah, looks like at -2 stops. So if I take 2 stops out of my exposure, then I'll be able to recover those highlights. But I make everything else darker down here, and that's not cool, right? Well, one of the best ways of manipulating light, at least in my opinion, is to come over to the local tab. Now that I know that this is 2 stops overexposed, or at least -2 will work for me, right? I'm going to only apply it to the areas that I need to apply it to. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on so I can see where I'm working, or turn on our exposure blinkers so I can see where I'm working. I'm going to click on the mask to my local adjustment. I'm going to invert this. Now, one of the other things, we'll go back to edit, keyboard shortcut, and we'll type in invert. Command I is the keyboard shortcut to invert your mask. Well, I want this to be, we'll go with Control I, okay? Excuse me, sorry about that. So now, when I hit Control I am inverting my mask, okay? So we'll go ahead and hit Control I, and we're gonna bring this down to our -2.15, or just until that goes away. All right, but all of this looks terrible down here. Well, I can take my brush and I can hit Shift X, and I can just paint that away. Now, don't worry, this is going to, or actually, let's go like this. So now that I have my sky corrected, what I can do is hit the gear icon, and I can go to Apply To. Hit the drop down here, and I'm going to apply this only to the highlights. Now, the problem with using Apply To, let me go zoom in. You start to get like these weird haloing effects, all right? And the way that you fix that is you figure out where the threshold is. Let's see if I can find, because I don't want to make it too much, but we'll go to the range, and then I'll pull it out of my shadows, my skin tones. Nope. Trying to get rid of that weird looking fringe. Because I blew this out, that is probably where some of the challenge is going to come. So here's another option. You can hit the Apply To, or I'm sorry, hit the little eye picker next to Apply To, and then click in the area that you want to apply this to, right? And that seems to work a little bit better, but still not so good. So we're going to go back to all, and then I'm going to click on my layer mask, and I'm going to go color range, and I'm going to click the eye picker for the color range. I'm going to click inside of there. So now I should be able to increase this range, and let me hit O. I see what's happening. So I'm applying this to my stairs, which I don't want to apply the darkening effect to my stairs. So what I'm going to do is hit Control I, and now I'm applying it to the sky, and it's no longer as blown out. Okay, so went through a whole lot of that. Rewind the video, so you know if you are like completely lost, if I was moving too fast. I'm trying to keep the stream from being too long, but if you got questions, just let me know. Now, you're probably like, well, the stairs look terrible. Let's hit O, and as you can see, it is applying this a little bit to the stairs. So I could just bring my brush and I could paint all of that away from the stairs, so that way the stairs aren't being impacted. And you're probably wondering, well, Chris, why didn't you just use the sky mask AI feature? And the reason why is based off of which version of ON1 you're using, you may not have that feature available to you. And I want to show you that you can make these detailed selections either through luminosity masks or through other masking options that are available inside of ON1. Now, the trees, they look a little odd, so I'm going to have to figure out my range here, and maybe somewhere like that. Let's hit O, maybe, and then we'll feather it and see if that fixes. Yeah, there we go. So this is look guys, this is how you solve problems inside of ON1. You just got to tinker around with it until you get that problem solved. And as you can see, I'm actually bringing back some of the line detail in those trees that were missing some of the branches that were overexposed. And if I hit O, you can see how that feather, it blurs the overlay or the mask. And just like that, I restored the sky, right? And I did use a brush, but I didn't have to necessarily. I could have just clicked it all around. So that's one way of doing it. Now, here is another option when it comes to using the local adjustments, and that is dodging and burning. So we're going to add an adjustment, and I'm just going to pull this down to 1.5. We'll just say that that's good, right? And we'll hit Control I. Yeah, very good. Okay, so now we're going to create a luminosity mask. We're going to start combining stuff, okay? Because this is how we grow as photographers and photo editors, especially when we start using ON1. So I turned on my layer mask, or my adjustment of my luminosity mask. Now, I don't care about adjusting for the sky anymore. So what I'm going to do is pull this out of the brightest areas. All right, and I'm going to invert this. So now I have my adjustment really focused on the stairs down here. And I want to make sure that I'm only getting this into the darkest areas because I really want to bring out some character in these stairs, all right? And I'm just going to pull this down, making all these detailed selections with just clicks of sliders, you know? That's the beauty of using these luminosity masks inside of ON1. You don't have to be a genius on how all of this stuff works. So I'm going to take that, and I'm even going to contrast this a little bit and open up the shadows just a touch, right? Now I'm going to copy this mask. We'll add another one. I'm going to hit paste, and then I'm going to hit Control I to invert that. And I'm going to come to my blending or my settings icon here and pull this out of my highlights because I don't want this in my highlights, right? So I need to get that out of the brightest areas of my image. In fact, or I'm sorry, I know what I'll do. Using other masking tools. So after you use the luminosity mask, what you can do is hit the letter M to get your masking bug tools. And I'm going to use the gradient tool. I'm just going to click right at the top here, rotate this around just a little bit, and I am going to really, like, I don't really want a huge fade, right? Because I don't need all of those adjustments up at the top of the image. I only need the adjustments that I'm going to make down here at the bottom, and I still have my luminosity mask adjustments available to me. So when I come back to my layer mask, I can really hone in down here at the bottom by using the window, and you can see, I had almost where I wanted to be, because on these areas that are just barely bright, I'm going to brighten them up. And we're just going to create some real interest in these stairs. That's the goal. So I'm going to hit the letter O. And then I'm going to come down here. And instead of this negative exposure that I have, I'm going to reset that. We're going to make a positive exposure. And I'm starting to see some grain in my image, which I don't want that. So I'm going to come back to my layer mask, and I'm going to pull the feather up. And that should help with getting rid of some of that grain. At least it should have. Let me hit the letter Z, zoom in. Okay, so that's actually texture on the stairs. So that's not grain. So maybe I could pull this feather down because we don't need it that much. And then I can come over here and I can even open up the shadows and bring down the blacks, maybe. Contrast it. Let's see. And all I'm trying to do is mold the light that's happening on these stairs. And I'm not worried about the straw around it, because I'm just going to take my brush, make it a little bit larger, and go to paint out. And I'm just going to paint this out. And that's actually too aggressive of a paint job. So I'm just going to bring the opacity down to about 17. And I'm going to paint around the bottom and the edges here. And it's okay if you have to do a couple passes to build up, right? So again, I'm doing what's known as dodging and burning. And this is actually one of my favorite ways to just sit on a photo and make edits to it, by doing the whole dodging and burning. And to me, it's fun. All right. So now I have all of my adjustments, so I can hit the backslash key. This is the original image, and this is the edited image. Now, to me, that is not the final look that I was really going for. Okay, so I'm going to hit the add adjustment. I'm going to hit the letter M. And if you watch any of my tutorials, you know I'm going to go for a vignette. And I'm going to click here. And I am going to bring this in to my stairs. All right, we're just going to hone that in and really make some interest on these stairs. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. And this is where you just got to take your time and enjoy what you're doing, right? So something like that. But I need to invert this, so Control I, and I'm going to reset that. We'll bring just a little bit of interest by sparking that one up, maybe opening some of the shadows, contrast, throwing some structure, so that way it's a little bit more interesting. Maybe even shrink it some more, and then fade it. Uh-oh. Didn't mean to click again. And then we'll make that a little bit tighter. Okay. Now, one of the things that I would love to be able to do in ON1 is duplicate, like this area, duplicate it onto another adjustment, but you have to make separate adjustments, and I'm not doing a very good job at renaming all of my adjustments. Actually, I can duplicate that adjustment, or at least the mask, right? I can just go copy and then come over here and paste it, and then hit the letter M so I get my masking bug again. And now I have this option available to me again. We'll just go ahead and pull that exposure up. We'll pull it out onto the stair here. Let's really pull up that exposure. And don't worry, I'm going to make this make more sense in just a second. Now, what's really cool is that I haven't even gone into, right? I've been spending so much time just showing you things, and I'm moving really quick and not doing the greatest job. I can saturate this area, right? Or I can change the white balance. Now, if for whatever reason, I'm like, you know what? I really want to change the white balance of these stairs. And there could be a reason why you would want to do that. Make them warmer or cooler. And just think about your image. How would you want to manipulate the color or the temperature of the light in one particular area of your image, right? So I'll just put it like so. And I think I'll just really make this like a narrow point, right? And then I'll bring that in just a little bit, and I'll clean up that little piece here in a second, but we'll just go ahead and throw in some color here. Now, that looks hideous, but if I come back to the top and I go to my layer mode or my blend modes, I have a few different options, right? And I can go with color, probably would work pretty good. I'll just pull that down and bring down the exposure. And now we're starting to create like some golden light on these stairs. Okay. Now it looks not so good. So grab the brush and I'm just going to paint that away from the top of this layer adjustment, and I'll paint it away from the bottom. And the reason why I have to do so many passes is because my opacity is set to 17. And I like to have my opacity set low when I do stuff like this, so I can blend it a lot better. All right. My goal is to blend this and maybe dehaze this just a bit. Could probably add in just a little bit of structure and maybe open some shadow. Yeah. Let's see what it looks like without it. And you can always change your opacity, right? So now that we have that, I'll do one last adjustment and then we'll move on from using local adjustments, because I could sit here all day and use local adjustments. So what we'll do is we will add one more vignette, and it's going to be a lot larger than the one that we just added. And I'm going to pull this out and bring it down and really center it around these stairs. All right. And then I'll just fade that and I'll bring down the tone there. Now I'm going to grab the brush tool and I'm going to hit Shift X to make my brush paint in. And I'm just going to come over the top here and fix this transition, because I don't really care for that bright sky. Like, the subject or star, if you will, of this image are these stairs. That's what I just spent all the time on correcting, right? And I would even go with maybe a different crop for this particular image. Let's go ahead and level this, because I think that that would be wise. And we can pull that to about there. And we'll hit apply. So there's a different crop to the overall image. And again, I just combined the luminosity mask down here. Inside of local adjustments, you can have a ton of these just going down here. Now again, I would recommend, this is for the sky, recommend you come in, double click, rename these. But you have so much opportunity using a local adjustment. Now, again, you can also use these. Let me minimize that. I'm going to turn off all of these other ones. You can also use these to develop your image all by itself. All right. So instead of coming over to the develop module, as you can see, I did nothing inside of develop. You come over here to local, and if you invert these, so I'll hit Control I can essentially, I have all of the same adjustments as I did over on the develop module. Now, I did a video on how you can use the local adjustments to develop your images. So if that's something you're interested in, just leave it in the comment section. I can do a updated version of that, because the last one I did was just editing black and white images. But as you can see here, there's some real value. Like I'm just doing, oh, that got yellow really quick. I'm just doing a really quick look at how you, or really quick demonstration on how you can just edit an image, and you can add multiples of these, plus you have the added benefit of going to the blend mode, and you can apply that to just the luminance value or just the colors. Like, you can do so much with your image in just the local adjustments, and it's all about changing the way that the light looks in the image, right? That's what we're going for here. So just food for thought, something for you to think about. That's local adjustments. Again, let me know in the comment section below if that is making sense, or if it, anything, if you got questions, right? I want to answer them and try and take some of the intimidation out of using ON1 if you are already experiencing that. Now, this would probably also be a really good time to let you know that if you would like to pick up a version of ON1 Photo Raw, in the description box below, there is an affiliate link. It's a great way that you can support the channel so I can continue to grow and invest back into the channel to create educational material just like this and other things. So check that out. And you can also sign up for my newsletter down in the description box below. Even though I don't really send a newsletter, sign up for my email list. I do send things out periodically. I'll be honest, I don't send it as often as I probably should, but if you sign up, you are guaranteeing that you will receive an email from me at some point with information and updates about what I'm doing for the community and videos that are coming out on YouTube and things of that sort. So check that out. Plus, you get free ON1 Photo Raw presets when you sign up. Now, if you are finding value in today's video, then consider smashing the like button and subscribing, so that way you can get the content. And it just tells YouTube that I'm doing a good job and you are being entertained, or you're learning something, which I hope you are. Smash the like button if you're learning something, all right? So, talked about a few different things when it comes to light. Now comes the fun part. And I'm only going to show you how I did this because I took some time to actually make this. This is an HDR image of these three photos. Now, if you don't know what an HDR image is, it's perfectly fine. It stands for high dynamic range. This was a sunrise photo, kind of, not exactly. But what I want to show you We'll click this one and this one, and we'll come to the compare. What I want to show you is this image on the left has a lot of vibrancy, and the image on the right, which this is the overexposed version, exposing for the shadows in the image, but you can see that there's mist here, and but there's not very much detail. And one thing that is definitely not there is this orange tint. All right, I'll show you how I made that, but you can see the sky and how blue it is and things of that sort. That's one of the beauties of editing your photos. When you look at an image and you're like, how did that person get that? Well, again, this is an HDR image. I did some adjustments. I went with a vivid camera profile. Now, if you didn't catch my earlier video from last week that talks about like some easy ways to get started with editing your photos inside of ON1, changing the camera profile is one of the easiest ways to get started. So that's what I did here. And then of course I made some edits, but these edits were specific to this particular image. That was the merged copy of the image. Now we'll get into the effects, because this is where I actually started to have some fun with the image. So obviously ON1, it will add the HDR filter whenever you merge two or more photos and you create an HDR image. So it added the HDR filter to my image without me having to do anything. All right, that was just a part of it, and I came in here, made some corrections as I saw fit. Now you're going to notice that I have a color adjustment, and this one should be for the trees, yeah, for the green. Without the color adjustment, the greens just weren't popping, so I had to make them brighter. This is a way of manipulating light in your image, right? The luminance value, or the brightness of your colors in your image, is another way of manipulating the light in it. So that was a lot of time spent just trying to figure out what looks the best, modifying the greens and the yellows here inside of ON1. And then I had this glow filter. Now the glow filter, I'll turn it off and turn it on, and I don't know if it's coming through in the YouTube compression, but what it's doing is it's really adding like some nice micro contrast. And if I remember correctly, I added it just to the highlights, and I cranked the highlights up really, really high. So if I was to turn this on to all, now everything, and I'll show you the mask, everything that's not the sky essentially is getting this filter. So everything tree line and below is getting this filter, because I didn't want it in the sky. However, I only wanted it in the highlights as well. So now it has like this subtlety to it. And these are the things, when we start talking about manipulating light inside of ON1, this is where you really want to start to fine-tune your creative style. Again, I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I'm just showing you what's capable inside of the software, so you can go and explore and just let your imagination run wild. This is all non-destructive, all right? You're not going to mess up your image, because if you wanted to, you could just hit reset all down here at the bottom and you get back to your base image. Now, if you're using ON1 Photo Raw 2022, you have what's known as snapshots. Now, as you can see, there's a few that were auto-saved. ON1 does that, which is really cool. But I also have some adjustments here where I did not, or I'm sorry, where I saved it. So if I hit new snapshot, I'm just going to hit final. And this is a way for you to really test out, like, did I like it with that light adjustment, or do I like it with this light adjustment, right? So this is the final version, but let's go to no color adjustment. So this is what the image looks like without a color adjustment on it. And then I also have the with a color adjustment. And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I like it with the color adjustment. So then that's when I started to finish editing the image, and then I ended up with the final version. Now we could take a look at what this one is from the 18th at 10:34 p.m. Looks like it was just a version of this with the color adjustment. Yeah, so I don't know why that's still in there, but whatever. The point that I'm making, or that I want to make, is you can explore as much as you want with your images. Now, on the final version, I want to go back to effects because we'll get to local adjustments, because you'll see how I really do take the time to just sit in the local adjustments module. All right, that's where I edit most of my photos. So I added, what, 2 filters, and then I don't really count the border, but you could count it, so if that's 3. And then this one just comes with the HDR look, right? The photo looks great without it. I think it does, really. But the HDR look is a whole nother look to the image. Again, something for you to play with, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, then don't use it. Now, I have it at 100% opacity. I could bring this down a little bit and just blend it in just barely. And maybe that is my new look in the image, you know, and I'll save that. HDR turn down. Don't worry about what you name your snapshots, because these save inside of the XMP or the sidecar file with all of your edits inside of ON1. All right. But the next thing that we will take a look at is our adjustment layer, or I'm sorry, our local adjustments. So as you can see, I got a few of them here. This one, we'll hit O, is just at the bottom, and that was probably me, bringing down the exposure and removing some of the contrast, because this is a reflection. And then this one is just this is the dock adjustment. It's just a masking bug using a radio filter, and then I came in, I increased the exposure, opened up the shadows a little bit in the midtones, and that was probably about it. Like, these are all micro adjustments, little things where I'm shaping the light around the subjects in the image and making as much interest in the image as I think I need to make. All right. And then same thing. This one is vibrance without the sky, and then this one is the sky and all that, right? So if I turn this off, the colors are a little dull. Now, this could be its own aesthetic. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. Again, my editing style, your editing style are going to be different, and that's okay. Now, that is editing. I just literally walked through every aspect of editing your photos the way that I would. I just want to make sure we're still streaming. Yes, we are. All right. That's the way that I would manipulate the light inside of ON1 with every single photo. So now let's jump back to our browse, because I do want to share just a few things before we hop off the stream. Now, we're going to go back to the photo with the hands. Actually, no. We're going to go to this photo, because I think the next filter that I want to show you is going to really do this photo some justice. We'll see. This photo does not have very much saturation in it, which is kind of cool. So let's click on effects, and we're going to add a bleach bypass filter. Now, this filter, you could read what it says down here in the bottom right hand corner, but essentially it's adding some serious contrast to the image, and it's working in a way where it's making your photo a little bit more punchy, if you will. And I really enjoy this because it gives you just enough control over the light, or at least the way that the light is being affected by this filter, so you can be creative, but it doesn't over saturate you with things, right? You don't have a ton of sliders here, and you can just stay immersed in editing the actual photo, right? So you can crank up the amount, and that's just how much of this effect that you're going to apply. And then you can move around with the brightness. Obviously, if you make it darker, look, you are making your image darker. Now, again, if you're going to print, I do recommend that you have your photo, or I'm sorry, have your histogram open so you can see what's happening to your photo as you make these adjustments. Because if you have no idea what's happening to your photo and you want to print and you're blowing out, which we're not, your highlights, you're going to have a pretty bad print on your hands later down the line. Now, you can bring the brightness up, and that's still not, it's barely blowing it out, but it's blowing it out in like those little speck areas. Again, this could be like something super cool that you could put on your computer, maybe share it as a Instagram photo, whatever it may be. Using the bleach bypass, you can really manipulate light, right? And then you have contrast, and this is really, you don't have to know what it's doing, right? You just grab the slider and you pull it left and right, and you say, oh, that looks kind of cool, that doesn't look kind of cool. All right, that is the in a nutshell the simplest way that I can share how to edit a photo. Now the detail really looks cool on this one, because look at what it's bringing out in these stones, right? If I pull the detail, reset it back to 0, and then I pull it up, look at all of the detail that's coming out in these stones. Now, when I do that, I'm also getting detail everywhere else. So, what I would recommend doing, now that and this is one of the coolest things about working in ON1, because I had the detail slider available to me there. What I can do is apply another filter, come to tone enhancer, come down here to detail, crank that up to get the effect that I want on these stones, and then come to my mask. And for this one, I'm just going to zoom out real quick, and then we'll go to our masking bug. And I'm using keyboard shortcuts so I can move around fairly quickly, but you could definitely, I do recommend that if you're going to work inside of ON1, you learn the keyboard shortcuts, because they will save you a lot of time as you navigate the software. And we're going to invert that. And now I have the detail only on my rocks. That is the beauty of working in ON1. I don't have to export to Photoshop or any other software to get these localized adjustments. Now, I didn't have to do it in the effects module. I could have come over here to local and use structure as well, which would have given me a similar result. But I wanted to show you Bleach Bypass because I think that's one of the coolest filters inside of ON1 that just doesn't get the recognition it deserves. It really doesn't. Now, the next one is the black and white filter. And I'm going to show that on this particular photo. I'm going to hit Effects, hit Add Filter, click on black and white. And with the black and white filter, this is almost like a all-in-one filter where I can manipulate the colors, or I'm sorry, manipulate the luminance value based off of the colors in the image, right? So if I want the noodles to be a little bit brighter, they're primarily yellow, so I know that I'm affecting the yellow channel. So I can make like a high key black and white, right? So bring up the yellows. Let's see, probably, or I don't want to make a high key. I like dramatic photos, right? I like contrast in my photos. That's my style. So I'll bring the reds down. I don't think there's any greens in the image. Yeah. And I don't think there's any aquas or blue. It's primarily red and yellow, right? So once I'm done with that, I can come over here to tone. And look at all the options that I have in tone. This is where I can really hone in my image. So maybe bring down the brightness. Now this is for the entire image. You're really only seeing it on the noodles. And the reason for that is because that's the brightest part. So as I bring it down, you can see that the fork itself is getting darker. But maybe I want to bring up the highlights, and I'll bring up the whites because it's a black and white image. And how do you make a cool black and white image? You got to really pull your blacks and your whites apart from one another, so that way there's a lot of contrast in the image, right? Then you can open up the shadows just a little bit here, or you can pull the shadows down. It's up to you, but you can see how manipulating the light in black and white and just having this available to you. Now, you can take it a step further because, again, everything that I teach, you can stack on top of everything, right? So now I want you to be careful. If you try to use a blend mode with this, it may not work out. Now that's kind of cool, but a blend mode with the black and white filter, it actually does look kind of cool. See, I'm experimenting. And this is what I'm encouraging everyone to do. Like, don't take it so serious. Photography is an art form, and sometimes making art is about experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work. It's no such thing as failure, especially when you have a software like this where you could just manipulate things and play around and see what you can do. All right, so just have fun. And it's okay if you don't know all of the features inside of ON1. That's why I make these tutorials and why I do these live streams, so I can show you things, and then if I show you something that you've never used, then great. If I show you how to use something in a new way, then even better. All right. Now, what I could do is maybe I just want this fork to really shine, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to paint over the bottom section of this fork. Hit the letter O. Oh, my opacity is really low. Let's just make it a little bit bigger. Or, I'm sorry, a little bit more opacity. Yeah, that should come out pretty good. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to come and I'm going to expose this until I get the highlights right where I want them, okay? Now, I'm going to hit the gear icon, hit apply to, and click highlights. Now I can come back here. I'll just close out this gear icon and I can mess around with the exposure. Oh, I don't think I put enough highlight action in there, so we'll come back to the gear icon and we'll pull this up until I'm really impacting those highlights. Okay, and I don't want it anywhere near my shadows, so we'll scroll down here and expose, maybe even pull the highlights, pull the white point up, and we'll even give it some structure, right? Maybe dehaze it a little bit. And now if I turn this off and on, look at how much brightness I brought into that area. Now it does look a little aggressive, so we'll just pull that back, right? Again, manipulating light, there's so many options available to you. All right, there's so many options available to you. So again, hopefully you found some value in the content. If you did, smash the like button and subscribe so you can see more videos, live streams centered around ON1 Photo Raw and just teaching the basic concepts and ideas, hopefully in a non-intimidating way, so you can just experiment with the images in front of you. If you got questions, you can always reach out to me on my website, freewillphotos.com. You can send me an email. You can go to the contact form. You can send me a message to my email address, which is listed in the description box below. But one of the best ways is just to comment on the video. I do respond to all relevant comments, right? If you're a spammer or internet troll, you're not going to get a comment. That's just the way it is. But if you have a comment or a question, and I'm okay if you got a negative comment. If you're like, Chris, you have no idea what you're talking about, you shouldn't do this. That's cool. I'd take feedback, right? I'd take constructive criticism. If that's what you think, everyone has their opinion, and I want to hear yours, because sometimes I hear things that make me better, and other times I just hear things that I say, all right, cool, thanks for sharing. And that's okay, right? That's okay. So I don't want to keep belaboring this. I hope you guys enjoyed the content today, and I'm sorry that I don't have my face cam on or anything like that. But hopefully the content worked out for you. You enjoyed it. I thank you for watching, and until the next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.